But don't the rest of you leave because even though we are recording, we won't actually share it with you because we want you to be here.
Yeah,
All
that's the
right.
promise we've made time and time again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen, and we will distribute the recording later along with the slides, but we do want you to be here. Ooh. All right. Hang on, y'all. I know how to do this. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our workshop on researching your country. So hopefully you're already in the position of having actually selected a country or narrowing down to just a couple options. Even if you are still deciding between a few different options, though, today's workshop will maybe give you some tips on how you can do some research that will help you narrow that down to a single country. But the real goal of today is to talk about why being specific in your application matters and how you can find out more about your country so that you can be specific in your application, whether you are applying for an ETA or a study research type award. So we'll talk about why specificity in your application will matter. Some of the sort of basic things you'll want to know about your country, just the sort of like um, meat and potatoes, like absolutely you should know these things and you can find them out very easily. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about what ETA applicants should be looking up and trying to understand about where they're applying, and also how logistics and other things about your country can shape a study research application. And then we'll provide some resources and tips you can use for how to actually do this type of country level research. Throughout, we'll make time for questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them when you have them. I'll pause for Q&A at times, but you don't need to wait until then to ask your question. Just drop it in the chat, take yourself off mute, raise a hand, whatever. There are three of us advisors here. We will absolutely be able to handle any influx of questions. So why does it matter? Well, first and foremost, Fulbright really is designed as a program that is all about cultural exchange and person-to-person ambassadorship. It's not just a grant to let you go somewhere and do what you want to do. Through you being in a country, Fulbright is trying to achieve this bigger purpose of increasing mutual understanding and promoting cultural exchange between the US and other places in the world. And so, key to showing that you are into that mission, that you are the right type of person to do a Fulbright, you need to show that you have true interest in and knowledge of the country you're planning to go to. So absolutely, that should be coming across in your application. But even beyond the application, it should just be something that is genuinely interesting to you. If you're planning to go spend 9 months or so in another country, you should want to know about that place. And you shouldn't just want to know about that through your Fulbright experience in that country. You should want to know about it before you ever get to that country. Beyond just embracing the spirit of Fulbright, though, in your application, it's very important that what you say you're going to do on a Fulbright be specific to where you're going to go and be feasible to fit into that country. So showing that your project is feasible and it is specific requires you to know about the country and the place you're going to go and be able to tailor your project and your language of your application to that particular place. At the very least, you want to be able to make an argument that your country is either the best place or the right place to do what it is you want to do on a Fulbright. Uh, you know, different places around the world are different. Something that might make sense in one country won't make sense in another country. You need to know those things before you apply because if you propose a project that just doesn't make sense in a particular place, it's not going to go well in the review process. Like, for a sort of silly example, like if you really wanted to go study how people do water skiing, it wouldn't make sense to apply to a primarily landlocked and desert-based country, right? Like that's the wrong venue to do that type of project. So you absolutely want to know the basics. Like start with just finding your country on a map and understanding where it is in the world, what countries it neighbors, what its geopolitical position is. What is its relation to the United States? Is it part of any particular sort of treaty organizations or sort of like meta government organizations, things like NATO or the EU or other sort of country blocks like the ASEAN. I don't know how they actually say it. I know the acronym AS ASEAN, which is a block of I think like 10 countries in sort of Southeast Asia. You want to know the demographics of the country. What are the major religions? What are the major ethnic groups? How rural versus urban is the country? How does the World Bank or the UN measure its level of development? So sort of the basic statistics and demographics of a country that helps you know what sort of cultural situation you're heading into. Similarly, how many languages are there in the country? Is there a majority language? Are there multiple majority languages? Is there actually a stipulated official language of the country, or are there multiple official languages? Sometimes a country through Fulbright, you'll have to have language proficiency, but other times you won't. And even when you won't need to prove language proficiency to Fulbright as part of the application, it'll be helpful for you to know like what language to expect street signs to be in, what language to expect most people on the street to be able to talk to you in, or shopkeepers to talk to you in when you go out and about. Try to review the sort of major historical episodes of a country. Um, it could be useful to know what the country's sort of like national story is. How do they think of their sort of official narrative of the country? What is their independence date, if they have one? Who did they become independent of if they have a colonial history? Um, what are other sort of like major markers, major turning points in that country's history? Just have a basic understanding of what that trajectory has looked like for that country. Also know about major recent events. So skim the news. What's in the news today? What are the big stories in recent years? Think about things like whether there have been natural disasters recently or in the last 10 to 20 years. Are there particular paths of immigration either into the country or out of the country? Are there major political transitions that have happened in somewhat recent time? But also think about things like viral hits. Like, is there, if you're going to a country in the EU, did they win the what's the Euro musical competition every year?
Eurovision.
Yes. Yeah. Did that country win Eurovision recently? And is that band really big right now? Like, know about the sort of big cultural productions that have come out of that country recently, but also things like growth industries. Like, has that country recently, been a big player in any particular industries or been a big like importer or exporter of something that has been in the news? When you're skimming the news, I think it's useful both to particularly focus on US news publications and see why that particular country is showing up in US news sources, but also skim, that own country's papers or news sources as well as just sort of global news, because there might be differing perspectives there, right? Like you could see recently with all the tariff news, you could see things showing up in US news that will let you know about the trade relationship between that country and the US, or the overall relationship between that country and the US. But that country might also be showing up differently in global news just for other things going on in that country. And with natural disasters, I think that can be important. I mean, Haiti's not an option to apply to right now, but it would be surprising if somebody wanted to go to Haiti on a Fulbright and didn't know about the Haitian earthquake that happened in, I think, 2010. So that's a while ago, but that's still really important for Haiti. And in many ways, Haiti is still recovering from it. So, like, you would want to know about a natural disaster that has shaped the recent history of a country. All of those things are pretty easy to research, right? Like Google searches is gonna do a lot of that for you. Um, can you think of anything else that you all would want to know about the place you are applying? You got something, Lily?
Um, I feel like for me, it's good to know about like traditional food, like more like aspects of the culture that maybe aren't as like obvious or
Yeah,
like big.
yeah, I think that's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I just as a sort of anecdote, I'll share. I have some friends who moved to Ireland about a year and a half ago now. And, I think a lot of us in the US think of like the UK, a lot of Europe is like it's pretty similar to the US, particularly the UK where they speak English. Like you're gonna think, um, it shouldn't be a huge culture shock to go from the US to Ireland. But it was for them a huge culture shock, but in all sorts of ways that they didn't anticipate at all. Things like even adjusting to the idea that like their washer and dryer were smaller than they are in the US, and the fridge is smaller. And so they have to shop more often. And they can't shop the way that they did in the US, where they could go to like Costco and then a grocery store on a Sunday and like stock up for the week. They also had a Subaru Outback in the US, which, in the US is like not a huge car. I mean, it's a decent sized car, but, people drive much bigger vehicles here. But in Ireland, that's a huge car. And when they were shopping for like a replacement car, they were really frustrated that they couldn't find something similarly sized because they have two kids in car seats and they want to be able to throw strollers in the back. We take things like that for granted here, and they weren't anticipating things like that being different. So I think a lot of those little things and also like when they go shopping at the store, there's like one brand for the thing that they're looking for instead of like five brands of the thing. Um, and so, yeah, I think everything from just like what is going to be sort of standard food choices or available to you at a grocery store to things like how big is the fridge going to be? Like how much space might you actually have for yourself, right? Like um, how do people think about those things can be really different in countries. I will say, I think part of what they didn't do was actually research Ireland all that well before they went there. They had been there on vacation, and like vacationing in a place is really different than living in it. So uh, and also just because this is funny and happened last night, I have some family in town from Spain right now, and they were at my house last night, and my dad was over here, and he gave them a ride back to where they're staying. My dad drives a truck, and they were thrilled because they've never ridden in a truck before. And so they all wanted to like go outside and just look at the truck for a while and like look at like the truck bed and like sit in it in different ways. My aunt was like super excited that she was going to get to ride up front in a truck. And like, like it's just like it's an F-150. It's just like a standard truck in the US, right? Like it's not anything crazy. But again, like they have no experience with trucks because nobody drives trucks in Barcelona. Like they were telling us that even out at the farms, people drive like much smaller little vehicles. So like little things that again you just kind of take for granted in the US are going to be really different, even when you're going to a country that you think is culturally fairly similar to the West. If you're applying for an ETA application, you're going there to be an English teacher. You're going there to engage in education. So you should absolutely try to understand how education in that country works. Um, Try to get an understanding of what the educational structure is in that country. Things like what government agency is in charge. Is there a central, Ministry of Education that sets a lot of the terms for how education works in the country? Is it a sort of regional and nationalized system like it is in the US, where there's sort of national standards, but a lot of education is handled by the states, and things might be fairly different from one state to another? How do grades work? How do they split school up there? It might be different than how we do it in the US. What is the sort of common level for most people to make it through? Do the 90% of the education have a high school equivalent education, or do only like 75%? Um, Similarly, you can look at things like what are the literacy rates in that country? And are there trends in education by gender? Like, um, have male students traditionally gone farther in education than female students, and is that changing recently or not? Are there particular areas that the country is focusing on right now? Sometimes you'll see that like ministries of education will have sort of national priorities that they will set. Things like we're focusing right now on preparing a global workforce, or we really want to have our students, we really want to focus on digital literacy right now. We had an ETA applicant to Kenya a couple years ago who saw that Kenya was pushing for kind of something along both of those lines, like preparing a technologically advanced workforce for, uh, you know, sort of globalizing industries. And she was a librarian by training, so she put together a project that would let her do these sort of digital literacy kits as part of her work as an ETA. She got accepted for it, like had a great application, but she was able to tailor it specifically to the needs that that country was communicating, as well as just show that she was generally prepared to be a good English teaching assistant. She was able to speak to particularly what Kenya was looking for, having ETA support at a national level. You can also, as much as possible, you can look to see if there are if you can get a sense of what the prevailing form of education or the philosophies of education are in that country. Are they sort of still doing more like memorization and rote learning, or are they doing more sort of creative styles of learning? What are the trends? Are there some? And it just helps you understand how you will position yourself as an ETA and any particular challenges you may have to overcome coming from an educational background in the US where you've been acculturated to a particular type of the way education works. And you might be stepping into a situation where it's really different or just sort of subtly different. But either way, it's really useful to know those things. And so again, some of this is just knowing the statistics and the sort of trends in education, but some of it might be having to dig a little deeper to get a sense of things like teaching philosophies and teaching styles in a country. If you're applying for a study research award, then knowing about the country is really going to shape the project logistics. Again, you really need to show that your project is feasible. And so you want to think about things like where specifically in the country you should go to do a project. Depending on the type of research or the project style you're there to do, you might need to think about things like whether you will have access to archives, libraries, government records. Are those things going to be sort of locked down and hard to get to, or are they the sort of thing that you can just walk in and have access to? Um, we have a fairly, I mean, in the US, it's not hard to get access to certainly historical government documents. Like you can access years and years and years of census data in the US. Um, you can use government records requests to get other records at times, and you might have to pay for them, but you might be able to get them, and they might have stuff redacted. But in the state of Florida, at least we have like a sunshine law that says government documents are public record, and you can request them if you want. Other countries aren't going to have that. So if you're there to do research on, voting trends or things like that, it might be hard to get access to those documents. So doing enough research before you go can help you think about any anticipated challenges with getting access to things. Um, Whether you might need like letters of introduction to get into a particular archive, or you might need to use your affiliate as a connection to various things. My background is in history, where I did my PhD. A lot of people did Caribbean history, and they would talk about one of the big challenges if you were doing research in Jamaica is that the like National Jamaican Archive, it had stated hours, but they weren't really true, and the archive was kind of out of town. And so you might go at like 2 p.m. one day and just find that the archive was randomly closed. And, like nobody was going to be there for a while. Um, and so that was just one of the challenges that they all had to work with was like the hours were going to be irregular, and you just kind of had to know that about the way that that archive worked. You should also know sort of what are the norms of research in that country and whether there are things that might be politically sensitive to the host community. Um, one of the topics that students have had to navigate before is like wanting to go to a country to study things like the LGBTQ community in that country, but in a place where the country itself, like at a national level, isn't really into that. Like they don't want to draw attention to that. Might be a more conservative and closed culture, and they might sort of officially, like the official stance of the country might be there are no gay people here. Um, and so the country may not, you might have to think about how you navigate doing research like that in a country if it is something that is politically sensitive to a country. And again, it just may not even be possible in certain countries to do certain types of research because the way Fulbright review works, the country itself has to also sign off on your project. So knowing these things before you go can help you think about how you phrase it and frame it in an application, but can also just help you think about the actual on-the-ground challenges you're going to run into trying to do some types of research in some countries. Again, Fulbright is really aimed at being a vessel for cultural exchange and promoting mutual understanding. So you should also think about the ways that your research might be of use to or interest to researchers in the host country. Ideally, you're not just going somewhere to extract knowledge, but to sort of collaboratively build knowledge with people in the host country. And so thinking about why researchers in that country will benefit from the work you're going to do how you might share it with people in that country, ways that you might be able to participate in things like conferences, workshops, seminars, symposiums, but also whatever the sort of outcome of your project is, if there's a way to share that back with people in the host country, because you need to think about them as stakeholders in the research you're doing as well. So try to find ways that your research can speak to things that people in that country also care about. And then, just like I mentioned a bit ago, thinking about, what are the common languages in a country, and that you may not need those common languages, you may not need them proficiency-wise to actually just pass the hurdles of the application. Language can matter beyond what's required for a country. So a country might only need you to have novice level proficiency of a language, but if you're proposing a research project where you're going to be going out into the countryside and interviewing farmers who are very unlikely to know English, and you don't know the native language, you're going to have a real barrier to doing your research. And so you need to think about whether there is a level of language required beyond just the basic level that that country will specify in its application. So it might turn out that you're going to Italy to do archival research, and you're going to need to read a bunch of Italian. So having novice Italian isn't going to be good enough, right? Because you're going to need to be doing, in-depth reading of Italian. You're going to need to show that you have sufficient proficiency to do the sort of analytical work you're saying you're going to do in that language. So your language evaluation can carry some of that weight. If you know that you will test higher than what is needed for that country, great. But you can also specifically address that in your application. And some countries will provide a stipend that you can do things like pay translators for. If it's a language that's not very commonly taught in the US and they don't expect you to have access to, you might be able to actually work with a translator for parts. But again, you'll need to know that, and you'll need to address it in the application. Doing this sort of research is all about showing the reviewers that you are prepared for what you say you're going to do on a Fulbright. Reviewers want to see that you're mature, that you're resilient, you're prepared. They want to see that you know about the country you're applying for. You can discuss things that may be a challenge for you in the research or the project that you want to do, and how you'll overcome those challenges. Again, as I spoke about with my expat friends, even culturally similar countries can provide more of a culture shock than you're expecting. And research can help you prepare for that and to show reviewers that you understand that that is part of doing a Fulbright, that you understand that things will be different in that country, and you've thought about ways you'll address those challenges. And as a reminder, again, the host country is a major stakeholder. Not only are they involved in the review process, and you'll have to show them that they'll need to see that your project is of value and they want you there to do that project. But you should also think about ways that beyond just getting past the hurdles of the application, your application is showing a true willingness to engage and to share with people in the host country. So how do you find out all of this? Well, if it were me, I would start with Wikipedia. I think that's a pretty good place to start. Just go to the country page and read through, because it will summarize a lot of the things you'll want to know. It will tell you what the government structure is. It will tell you what the cultural and demographic structure of a country is. It will outline many of those major historical episodes and give you the sort of what the country thinks of as like its national narrative will be pretty clear from reading the Wikipedia page. I also think it's useful to spend time on Google Maps. If the country has been mapped through Street View, even do that. Like, if you're going to go to a particular city, get down on the street level and look at like what does it look like on those streets. If I had been surprised by my cousin saying last night that nobody drives trucks in Barcelona, looking at Street View of Barcelona would answer why that's the case, right? The streets are narrow, the parking is small. So it helps you know what to expect. Are there a bunch of vendors on the streets? Are the streets pretty sparse? I mean, it just gives you a sense of what you're going to be walking into, so that it's not just you step off the plane and it's the first time you've ever seen this place. You can also look at satellite or terrain maps. I mean, just, kind of useful to know what the terrain of a country is going to look like. If you're going to a particular place in the country, just sort of understanding like the surroundings of that particular place. I also really like maps, and so like for me, that would be a good starting point. Browse the government websites, see what the country is sort of officially saying in various places. That's always useful to know. You can look at things like if the country has a Ministry of Education, like go to its website, skim through it as much as you can, see what it is saying about itself. You can also check things like UNESCO, which has educational data on some countries. I think it used to be more thorough, but I've had a harder time accessing it lately. Um, there are also, I'll show you these three. I have them open right now on a browser tab. So these are links. You all can go straight to these links later when we send out this PowerPoint for this Generis Global Education Reports, BBC Country Profiles, and WorldData.info. Previously, I would have sent you to the CIA Factbook as well, but it's been discontinued. So bye-bye CIA Factbook. But I'll show you these three and show you how these sources can be pretty useful. So I just kind of randomly found this Generis thing. Generis is like a global law firm, um, but it has a bunch of information on laws and like government structures in different countries. And so, as a good example, like if you're an ETA person who was going to apply to Uruguay and you wanted to know how the education structure in Uruguay worked, you could Google, or not Google, you could put in search inside this Generis Global Education, search for Uruguay education, and you will get eventually. It took a while earlier too, but I know this works. So just sit tight. While we're waiting, any questions? Thoughts, concerns?
I have a slight, ooh, never mind. I'll wait until you're done with this.
I mean, please feel free to ask. We can like not.
I'm like I'll say it's a concern. I'm interested in like fashion history, and so I'm curious as to how I should word my application in terms of like studying craft, since that's not something that's really valued right now by our particular administration, and they're the ones funding the project.
I'll let Bonnie and Tingy, if you all have any thoughts, chime in. But I'll say I don't think that. So first, your first round of review is nothing to do with the administration. It
Hmm.
is the people who have always reviewed Fulbright, basically faculty from different universities who have area or language expertise who will be brought in to review your application. And they're going to just review it as they always have Fulbright applications, which
Okay.
is what are you doing? Um, I mean, it's always important in an application to explain the sort of broader significance, why people who
Hmm.
aren't themselves interested in fashion history will find value in what you're doing. That's always been important. Um, the administration only comes into play in this new final round of review if you are selected as a finalist by the host country. While this isn't very well explained, we think it is still happening, that there is now a new sort of political level of review done by the US State Department, which is mostly to check that you are not proposing research that is in violation of recent executive orders that basically outlaw
Gotcha.
research on climate change and DEI related topics. You can
Okay.
still research those topics framed a little differently and using different words than you could have a couple years ago. So, for instance,
Okay.
we had an applicant a couple years ago apply to go to New Zealand to do research explicitly on climate change. Her, she made it to semifinalist. We'll never know whether New Zealand selected her or not. So, like, it's possible New Zealand selected her and then the State Department rejected her for research on climate change. It's also possible that New Zealand just didn't accept her as a finalist. We will never know that. But it's very plausible to me that her research was selected by New Zealand, but then kicked out by the State Department review because it was explicitly about climate change. She reapplied last cycle talking about environmental transformation instead of climate change and is now sitting as an alternate, which means that she hasn't been kicked out of the process. So a wording change and a different way of framing the research, it's the same project talked about differently. Um,
Gotcha.
that is the only place where the administration will weigh in on your project.
Yeah, that's my concern going forward is that like usually I talk about women's craft a lot. And so I have to, that's just something I want to keep in mind as I'm going into this is phrasing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's we will help you navigate that throughout the advising process.
Okay, thank you.
The the other thing I'll mention is that if you have a country in mind, you can go to the grantee directory to see what other research projects have people done recently, right? So it may give you an idea of the types of projects that the country is looking to support anyway. Um, Sometimes on the specific country pages, it'll say that they're looking for, more arts applications or more engineering applications. So sometimes they'll provide hints like that that'll give you an idea of whether or not your project would really mesh with that. But I would say looking at that grantee directory can also help you to understand a little bit more about the types of projects that they are interested in.
Yeah.
Thank you. I definitely will. I appreciate that.
Okay, so here's what this education overview would look like if you clicked on it here. And you can see it's actually like it's pretty detailed, it's pretty good. Um, gives you, tells you about how the education system in Uruguay works. It even, includes a little bit of like what the national philosophy on education is. Um, and if you go down, you'll get the historical sort of background on it, the structure of education in that country. And then I believe you'll get some um, maybe it's up here in this little, maybe there's a box. Yeah, okay. Well, I thought somewhere they had like statistics on um, things like literacy and whatnot, but maybe that's not on this one. Anyway, this is a pretty good narrative overview of like how the education system in Uruguay works. So if you'd read the Uruguay Wikipedia page and then read through this, you would already know a fair amount about the country you're applying for. But you can also come over to this BBC News country profiles and you can drill down a little bit more and get some additional information. So I'll just stick with Uruguay as an example here. And so you'll get a country profile on Uruguay. And you can see it was last updated on the 25th of November 2024. But it will give you some things that are interesting to know about this country, right? That like it was the first country in Latin America to establish a welfare state. Tell you who the current president is. Give you a little timeline of the country. So again, knowing those major historical episodes is useful. And then this world data website is also pretty useful. So again, I'll stick with Uruguay. So we'll go to the Americas. And I believe that is Uruguay. And here is where you'll get many of those statistics that I was suggesting earlier are useful. Here's the population pyramid, so the just demographics of the country, life expectancy, birth rate, death rate, conversion rate, so you understand when Fulbright tells you like, oh, your stipend will be, this many, and then they'll put it in like pesos a month. What is that actually going to be? Get a sense of that here. Average day and nighttime temperatures helps you know what you need to pack, what you need to take with you, whether you need to go like buy a big winter jacket or not. Languages. All right, so like clearly most people there are going to speak Spanish. Not really a surprise, but not you're going to find, are they here for languages? Like if you looked at Nigeria, you would see a number of different languages listed because Nigeria has a number of different languages. Religion, somewhat useful to know. Again, if you were looking at Nigeria, you would see that it's majority Muslim, 40% Christian, and then like 10% native religions. I know that because I looked at Nigeria earlier today just to make sure that this world data page was still working. You can see how it is sort of rated by the World Bank for political indicators in terms of stability, rule of law, democratic values. Again, these things will be in different places depending on the country that you look at. I said no about what like world, what like treaty blocks and things like that a country might be part of. Here is where you'll see some of that listed. So you can see that Uruguay is part of the G20, for instance. It's also a member of the Organization of American States and the UN. How urban versus rural is a country, you can get some sense of that by looking at land use. So a lot of just sort of, quick statistical facts about a country that will help you know a little bit more about what you would be heading into going to a particular place. So just to show you what another country might look like, we'll go and look at Nigeria for a second because I mentioned it a couple times. And so you can see there's a lot of different languages in Nigeria. You can see trade agreements, alliances, political indicators look fairly different for Nigeria than they did for Uruguay. If you come up here to some of these other things, if you click like education, you will see how far different people go through education. So you can get a sense here of like, is it common for most people to have gotten, um, a post-secondary degree of some sort? And you can see that the bachelor percentage rate for the country is only 10%. Education expenditures, literacy rate among adult population is 70%. One of the things that, like a student who went to Uruguay a couple years ago as an ETA, one of the things that was really important to her that she wanted to she chose Uruguay because it has something like a 97% literacy rate. And she really wanted to understand how the country's policies have shaped such a high literacy rate. So for her as a researcher, that was an added bonus to go to that country as an ETA and helped her write an ETA application that was very specific to Uruguay because she was talking about the literacy rate and the sort of national structures that have encouraged it and the research she was going to do to get a better understanding of what those programs and policies had looked like. So 3 useful sites. I think, there is a FSU, if you go to the LibGuide for international affairs, it will list other things. I clicked through a lot of them and the links are broken. So these are the 3 that I found that are still working, that are fairly good for just giving you broad overviews of different things I think are worth knowing about a country that you might be interested in going to. So what questions do you all have? And this can either be about just Fulbright in general or, what we've talked about today. Any questions? There's got to be some questions. People always have questions about Fulbright. Bonnie, Tingy, anything I left out that should be said?
I think so. I mean, the one thing I'll mention, especially with ETA applications, it's very common for people to do a lot of research, and then the first half of their statement of grant purpose is reiterating facts back to the country about itself. And that's not what you want to be doing, right? You can use that as like a jumping off point. Like I've had people say, according to the Ministry of Education, the goal is this, and then talking about how they contribute to that. But you don't want a significant chunk of your statement of grant purpose to just be telling the country about itself. They want to know how you're going to use that information and feasibly use that information, right? You have 9 months there in most cases. You're not going to be able to completely upend an educational system or reform it in that time. So really thinking about how you fit into that overall goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you should absolutely know enough that you could write a statement of grant purpose that is just telling a country about itself. But that should inform what you're saying, not be what you're saying.
Yeah.
I had a student email me this morning about like his PI, like here, knows some labs in the countries that he's interested. So sometimes there might be connections if you're kind of open to going anywhere or you have a couple of different places. Sometimes it might be helpful to reach out to professors or supervisors that you've worked with and see if they might have places, people in places that you didn't realize.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, I'd say really the takeaway is, you have the internet at your fingertips. It's not hard to research the place you're going to go. Do it. Know as much as you can about it.
This is like not at all relevant to anybody else. This is just relevant to my application, or maybe other people are feeling the same things. I feel like I've done like a lot of research on the countries I'm interested in applying to, and I'm still just really struggling to come to a conclusion about which one I want to apply to. Um, the work I want to do is like very broadly centered on EU policy, and the impacts of a specific like EU directive on aquaculture management at a country level. Um, yeah, and I'm still just like kind of stuck on what it is, what the best way to like go about that is. So if you guys have any advice.
Lily, I'll acknowledge I saw your email and I know I owe you a response that you're thinking about
That's
the
okay.
EU-wide award. I was out all of last week and I'll be out most of today and all of tomorrow. So I was here the last couple days, but I was just playing catch up and I haven't gotten to yours yet.
That's
Um,
okay.
but I think the EU award like seems pretty appropriate for your goals. Um, I don't know. Have we ever had anybody apply for it before? Do you know, Bonnie? Has anybody applied for
I
yeah.
think so.
So we don't have like, direct experience with it, but your project seems like a very good fit for what it is designed to do, which is to let you do a comparative project among a number of different EU countries to see how a EU-wide policy is playing out differently.
Um, yeah, it seems like it would be a very good fit. Sarah was like, I think you should still apply to Germany. It seems like better odds. Which I mean, she's right. Like it's definitely higher odds uh in Germany, but yeah, I'm still just struggling with the decision of which one to do.
Yeah, I mean I think we will acknowledge that like the statistics can matter, but we would say that's not how you should make your decision. Like if your project fits best with doing the EU-wide one, even if the odds are longer, if that just makes you have a stronger application and a better fit project, like it's not just a statistical question, it's also one of where you actually fit best and how you can make the best argument for fitting with a particular award. And if you're sort of shoehorning a project into Germany, but you're not actually very excited about doing a project in Germany, it doesn't matter if the statistics are good, because if you have a lackluster German application, like you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
But if you have a great application to do the EU-wide one, you're going to be more competitive, even if the statistical like odds are not in your favor as much. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
for what that's worth,
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds
that
good.
would always be my advice is like apply for the award that you are most enthusiastic about because that will lead to the best application.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. I mean, I'm happy to hang out and answer more questions, but there don't seem to be any. So thank you all for being here. We will get this recording posted and make sure that you get the slides from today as well. If you think of any follow-up questions, please just reach out to any one of us and we'll be happy to follow up with you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Libby.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye all.